Welcome back to Sudo Sergeant. In this segment, I'm going to talk with you about disk partitions and file formats. I'll show you how to view the disk partitions that are on your storage device and how to modify the file system that they're formatted to. So what is partitioning a hard drive? Partitioning a hard drive divides the available space into sections that can be accessed independently. The entire drive may be allocated as a single partition or multiple partitions for cases such as dual booting, maintaining a swap partition, or to logically separate data such as audio and video files. The required information is stored in a partition table. There are two types of partition tables that I will discuss: master boot record, MBR, and globally unique identifier partition table, GPT. The first one I'm going to talk about is master boot record. The first 512 bytes of the storage device is dedicated to the MBR. This is an older partitioning scheme designed to work with the boot process of a BIOS. During the boot process, the BIOS loads the beginning 512 bytes of the first valid disk in the BIOS disk order. Now let's move on to the globally unique identifier partition table. GPT is a partitioning scheme that is part of the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface specification. It uses globally unique identifiers, GUIDs, or UUIDs in the Linux world, that's universally unique identifiers, to define partitions and partition types. It's designed to succeed the master boot record partitioning scheme method. GPT is recommended for systems that boot via a UEFI system. All right, now let's move on to a practical example. So I have my Raspberry Pi here, and I've got my little USB dongle. So take Tux and plug them into the USB, and let's see where this device comes up in our device tree. So do ls_blk. There's no partitions on it, so it just comes up as SDA. And then you will see this MMC_BLK0. MMC_BLK0 is the device, and then MMC_BLK0 P2, P7, P5, P1, and P6. Those are the partitions, and you can see that they're mounted. I'll get into that in just a little bit, but we're just going to stay focused on this SDA. And you can also see that on our device directory. So we'll do ls/dev, and you'll see that it comes up right here. Now, the utility for modifying partitions that I'm going to use in this instance is fdisk. So we'll do fdisk, well actually we need sudo fdisk, and then we need to provide the argument of the disk, /dev/SDA. And press M to get the menu. This is our list of available instructions that we can send this program, which will tell us what's going on with our partitions. We'll type P to see our partition table. And you can see there are no partitions on here. Let's create a DOS partition table. So let's do N for new partition, and we'll make it the primary, P. We can just go with the defaults here. It's a partition number 1. First sector, this is where the partition begins on the storage device. And last sector, we can either provide a size. Let's say if we wanted to have more than one partition. This is an 8 gig device. Let's do +4G. That will give us +4 gigabytes. So we have created a new partition, partition 1 of type Linux. It's size of 4 gigs. Let's print the partition table again. Now you can see that here's our device information, and then here is a partition. Right now everything is just in memory, and look at our menu again. So when we exit this program, we'll send it the W, which will then write the partition table to the storage device. Now let's make another partition. We'll do an N, another primary partition, default 2, which is the second partition. We'll do the first sector and last sector, just the whole thing. And now let's print the partition table again. Now you see we have 2 different partitions on this one device, which is pretty cool. Let's look at our menu again. We can change the partition type. Let's do L to list the known partition types. Right now they're configured as Linux partitions. You can see we could make a partition that would be suitable for FAT32 or Windows 95 FAT32. There are many different types of partition types, but we're just going to use Linux. So let's do the W to write out the partition table. We might get an error there. We didn't, but let's ls_blk again, ls_blk. This may or may not show us the partitions on this disk, because sometimes whenever the partition table changes, the operating system needs to be restarted. Well, let's see here. It looks like in this case, the partition table updated correctly. We have SDA1 and SDA2. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to format the partition. I'll use this utility mkfs. We already know our device and our partitions. So we'll do sudo mkfs.ext4/dev/sda1. Now, ext4 is a generalized file system, pretty much the standard Linux filing system. Allocation table, writing superblocks, and file system account information. We'll just wait for that. So ls blk, actually let's do a sudo fdisk base l/dev/sda. So now that we have our partition formatted, we can then make a directory and mount it in the system. Right now you see where I'm at. I'm home sergeant, and then I will make mkdir, make a test directory. So ls, there's the test directory, ls space test. Nothing in there. Well, there's nothing on the partition either. C space test. Now let's make a mount 0 and a mount 1. mkdir, mount 0. And mount 1. I could have did some bracket expansion there, but let's save that for another time. So we'll do sudo mount /dev/sda1 to our present working directory, which is /home/sergeant/test, and then mount 0. So now let's try the same thing, except SDA2, which is the partition that we didn't format. And we're going to mount it to mount 1. Let's see what kind of error we get. There. See, it says mount, wrong file system type, bad option, bad superblock on dev SDA2, missing code page or helper program. So we get an error when we attempt to mount a partition that hasn't been formatted. So we see that SDA1 mounted with no problem. Hey, that's all the time we have for this segment. I showed you how to create a partition, format the partition, and mount the partition to your file structure. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, please leave them at the Element 14 community at element14.com/sudosergeant. See you there.